His words cut through the air like a blade. My son, my own flesh and blood, stood there in my kitchen with eyes I barely recognized, full of anger, full of someone I didn't raise. His name is Michael Porter, and at that moment, he wasn't the polite, thoughtful boy I had spent 35 years loving. He was a stranger. I stood frozen, one hand still holding the dish towel I had been using to dry the plates. The walls around me felt smaller, colder. This was the same kitchen where I had sung lullabies while stirring soup for my boys, the same place where birthdays were celebrated, where the smell of cinnamon rolls once filled every corner, and now it had turned into a battlefield. The worst part wasn't the yelling, it was what he said, her house. Those two words echoed in my head again and again. This wasn't her house, it was mine. I had built it from the ground up, brick by brick, year by year, with my bare hands and endless nights of sacrifice. But standing there, it suddenly didn't feel like my home anymore. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, crossed her arms and stood behind Michael with a quiet smirk. She didn't need to speak. Her expression said everything. She was winning. She had turned my own son against me. It all began over something so small, a few garden pots she decided to move. I had asked her gently not to touch the plants I had cared for since her husband was a child. I said it softly, kindly. But she looked me straight in the eye and told me, this is my home too. That's when Michael exploded. I remember the way my heart pounded, the way my knees trembled. I wasn't angry, I was hurt, deeply hurt. Because that day I realized something I never wanted to believe. The son I raised to be kind, respectful, and loyal no longer saw me as his mother. My name is Elaine Porter. I'm 68 years old, and that morning, standing in the kitchen of the house I built with my own two hands, I realized I had just lost something much greater than a simple argument. I had lost my place in my own home. People say a house is just walls and a roof, but for me, this one was built from my very soul. 35 years ago, my husband Harvey and I bought this piece of land. It wasn't much then, just a patch of dirt filled with rocks and weeds, but Harvey looked at it like it was gold. He said, "Elaine, one day we'll raise our boys here. This will be our home." I believed him because Harvey was a man who kept his promises. We didn't have much money, so we started small. For the first 5 years, we lived in a tiny trailer parked right where the front yard is now. I remember cooking on a little gas stove while Harvey worked long hours in construction. Every dollar he earned, we saved for bricks, nails, cement. On weekends, he'd bring home leftover materials from job sites, and together we'd build, one wall at a time. I wasn't just his helper, I was his partner. During the day, I worked as a housekeeper and seamstress. At night, I baked pies to sell at the Sunday market. Some nights, my hands bled from scrubbing floors, but I didn't mind. Every ache and blister meant we were one step closer to finishing our dream. When our first son, Michael, was born, I thought I'd never been happier. He had Harvey's smile, soft, patient, full of hope. A few years later came Adam, our second boy. Suddenly our small world was filled with laughter, spilled milk, and muddy shoes running through the yard. Those were the best years of my life. Then tragedy struck. Harvey died in a work accident when the boys were still young. The day they brought me his hard hat, I thought my life had ended. But I looked at my son's two pairs of frightened eyes and I knew I couldn't fall apart. I had to finish what we started. So I did. I sold everything I could, even my sewing machine, to pay off the debt and keep the land. I took double shifts, cleaning offices during the day and cooking at a diner at night. There were times I went to bed hungry so my boys could eat. But I never let them see me cry. I wanted them to believe the world was still good, that their father's dream wasn't dead. Years later, the house finally stood proud, a 2-story home with a porch wrapped in white railings and a small garden out front. I still remember painting the walls pale yellow, Harvey's favorite color. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Every brick carried a story. Every corner carried love. And when Michael graduated from college, I looked at that house and thought, we did it, Harvey. Our boys made it. I never imagined that one day that same son would tell me I didn't belong in the place we built together. I never imagined that the home I poured my life into would become the very thing that broke my heart. The first time I met Rachel, I knew my life was about to change, but I didn't realize how much. Michael brought her over one Sunday afternoon, just after church. I still remember the way she walked through the door, heels clicking on the hardwood floor, perfume filling the air, eyes scanning every inch of my living room like she was appraising it. Her voice was sweet, polite, but her gaze told another story. She looked at my worn furniture, my old family photos, and smiled the kind of smile that hides judgment behind courtesy. "Your home is quaint," she said, as if that was a compliment. I forced a smile back. "Thank you, dear. It's not big, but it's full of memories." From the very start, I could feel a wall between us. It wasn't built from words, but from something quieter: disapproval, maybe even embarrassment. Rachel was from the city, used to polished apartments, coffee shops, and shiny things. My home, built with sweat and history, was too ordinary for her taste. Still, I tried my best. When Michael told me they were getting married, I swallowed my unease and congratulated them. I even gave them $3,000, the little I had saved for emergencies, so they could have a nice wedding. Rachel thanked me with a brief smile, the kind people use when they're collecting what they think they're owed. After their wedding, Michael told me they'd stay with me just for a while until they saved enough for a house of their own. I was happy, truly. I thought it would be nice to have family under one roof again. I imagined Sunday breakfasts, laughter, maybe even a daughter-like bond with Rachel. But from the first day they moved in, everything began to shift. Rachel started making changes, little ones at first. She replaced my beige curtains with bright green ones because they felt fresher. She moved my family photos to a drawer to make room for her framed wedding pictures. She reorganized the kitchen, moving my pots and spices to places I couldn't reach. When I gently mentioned it, she laughed and said, "Oh, Elaine, it's just decor. Don't be so old-fashioned." Michael defended her every time. "She lives here too, Mom. She just wants to make the place feel comfortable." I wanted to ask, comfortable for who? But I bit my tongue. I didn't want to seem ungrateful or controlling. It only got worse. Rachel began inviting her friends over without asking. They'd sit in my living room, sipping lattes and talking as if I didn't exist. Once, I overheard one of them say, "I can't believe she still lives with his mom." "Poor thing," Rachel laughed, not even trying to defend me. The day she crossed the line was the day she told me, "If you're not happy with how things are, maybe you should find another place to live." She said it casually, as if suggesting a trip to the store. Michael stood beside her, silent, eyes fixed on the floor. That silence hurt more than her words. It told me everything I needed to know. That night, I went to my room, closed the door, and cried into my pillow so they wouldn't hear me. I wasn't crying because of the insult. I cried because I realized I had raised a son who no longer had the courage to stand up for what was right. And worse, I was starting to feel like a guest in my own home. It happened on a Thursday morning, a day that started like any other but ended with a decision that changed everything. I had gone out early to buy vegetables from the market. When I returned, I stopped in my tracks. My garden, the one place that had always brought me peace, looked unrecognizable. The roses I'd planted in memory of my husband were moved to a shaded corner, the lilies uprooted and stacked against the fence. My heart sank. Rachel was in the middle of rearranging everything, smiling proudly like she had accomplished something grand. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling more with disbelief than anger. "Oh, I just wanted to make space for a patio table," she said, brushing dirt from her hands. "It'll look more modern this way." "Rachel," I said quietly, "those plants have been there for 15 years. They're not just decorations. Please don't move them without asking me first." She sighed dramatically. "Elaine, you really need to stop being so possessive about everything. This is my home too." Before I could answer, Michael came out of the house, newspaper in hand. He looked tired, distracted, and uninterested. "Michael," I said softly, "can you please tell your wife that I've taken care of this garden for years? I just want her to respect that." He didn't even look up. "Mom, please don't start. Rachel's just trying to make things better. You're overreacting." And then came the words that broke me. He lowered the paper, his eyes suddenly sharp. "Don't you dare argue with my wife in her house." Her house. Something inside me froze. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I simply looked at my son, the boy I once rocked to sleep, the boy I prayed over every night, and realized he no longer saw me as his mother. He saw me as an obstacle. Rachel crossed her arms behind him, that smug little smile returning to her face. In that moment, I knew I couldn't win by arguing. I would lose my dignity if I tried. So I turned away and went inside, my hands shaking as I reached for the kitchen counter to steady myself. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, thinking of Harvey, thinking of all the years I had fought so hard to keep this family together. And by dawn, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called a locksmith. The man who arrived was about 60, kind eyes, rough hands. He listened quietly as I explained my situation. When I finished, he nodded and said softly, "You'd be surprised how often this happens nowadays, Ma. Parents build the nest, but sometimes the birds forget who made it." It cost me $150 to change every lock in the house. That Friday night, Michael and Rachel came home to find their keys useless. I heard them from my bedroom rattling the door, knocking, then banging harder. "Mom, open the door," Michael shouted. Rachel's voice followed, angry and shrill. But I stayed silent. For the first time in months, I felt strangely calm. I wasn't cruel, I wasn't vengeful. I was simply reclaiming what was mine. And as their voices faded into the cold night, I realized I had finally taken back something far more valuable than a set of keys, my peace. The next morning, my phone rang nonstop. Michael's voice on the other end was a mix of anger and desperation. "Mom, what were you thinking? You can't just lock us out like that." I stayed calm. "Michael, I didn't lock you out. I locked disrespect out." He groaned. "Please, Mom, we don't have anywhere to go. The hotels are expensive, and Rachel has work on Monday. Can we just come in and talk?" "Of course we can talk," I said gently, "but only when you come alone." There was silence on the line. "You know I can't do that," he muttered. "She's my wife." "And I'm your mother," I replied. "If she wants to talk, she can start by apologizing for the way she's treated me." He hung up without another word. That afternoon, I saw a sleek black car pull into the driveway. A woman stepped out, tall, stylish, with Rachel's same sharp eyes. She introduced herself as Linda Collins, Rachel's sister. I already knew what this visit was about. "Mrs. Porter," she began with a tight smile, "I came to talk about the situation with my sister and your son." "Of course," I said, inviting her in. "Please, have a seat." She glanced around the house the same way Rachel had months ago, like she was measuring how much money the place was worth. "Look," she said, crossing her legs. "Rachel's a good person. She may have said things she didn't mean, but this whole thing has gotten out of hand. My sister told me you've always been controlling. Maybe this is just your way of holding on to Michael." I took a deep breath. "Linda, I don't need to control my son. I raised him to be kind and responsible. I simply expect the same respect I've given him all his life." She smiled, the kind of smile that hides arrogance. "You know, families are different these days. Daughters-in-law don't have to obey their mother-in-law anymore. You can't expect her to tiptoe around you." I looked her straight in the eye. "I don't need obedience. I need basic decency." She moved into my house, changed everything, and humiliated me in front of my son. I won't live like that again. Linda sighed dramatically. "So what's it going to take? Do you want Rachel to get on her knees? Kiss your hand? Beg for forgiveness?" "No," I said firmly. "I just want her to acknowledge that she was wrong. That's all." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you even hear yourself? You'd rather live alone than have your son close?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'd rather be alone and respected than surrounded by people who treat me like a burden." Linda stood up, frustrated. "Fine, but when your son ends up on the street because of your pride, remember this conversation." I didn't answer. I simply walked her to the door. When she left, I finally sat down and let the tears fall. I wasn't crying out of guilt, I was crying because I missed my son. But deep down, I knew this was necessary. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes protecting your dignity is the only way to remind others what love truly looks like. Days turned into weeks and silence filled every corner of the house. No footsteps, no voices, no sound of Michael's laughter drifting from the living room. Just me, my thoughts, and the steady ticking of the clock. Then one afternoon my phone rang. It was Michael, but his voice sounded different, exhausted, heavy. "Mom," he said quietly, "I don't know what to do anymore." "What's wrong, son?" He sighed. "Rachel and we've been fighting nonstop. We've run out of money. I missed work this week. I feel lost." My heart clenched. "Michael, come talk to me. Alone." He hesitated. "Rachel won't like that." "Then she doesn't need to know," I said softly. "You need to clear your head." Later that evening, I learned from Adam that Michael had been drinking too much, trying to drown his guilt and confusion. Rachel was furious with him, blaming me for everything, and still he refused to truly see what had gone wrong. 2 days later, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Michael, it was Rachel. Her voice, usually sharp and confident, trembled slightly. "Mrs. Porter, it's Rachel. Can we talk?" I paused before answering. I'm listening. I know I haven't been easy, she said, choosing her words carefully. Ethan, I mean, Michael isn't himself. He's not sleeping, not eating. He misses you. I miss him too, I said quietly, but missing someone doesn't erase what happened. I know, she whispered. I was wrong. I waited. Wrong about what, Rachel? She exhaled shakily. About everything. I moved into your home and treated it like mine. I disrespected you. I made Michael choose sides when I shouldn't have. I thought if I didn't control things I'd lose him, but I see now that I almost destroyed him instead. Her words caught me off guard. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, and for the first time it wasn't coated with pride. Why now? I asked. Why apologize after all this time? Because I'm scared, she said simply. Scared that I've turned the man I love into someone he's not, and I know you're the only person who can help fix that. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, Rachel, an apology means nothing unless it's followed by change. If you truly want forgiveness, you need to show it not to me, but to your husband. I understand, she whispered. I'll do whatever it takes. Then come tomorrow, I said. Come alone. We'll talk. When I hung up, I sat quietly, hands folded on the table. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive her, but I knew one thing for certain: this was the first honest step any of us had taken in a very long time. The next afternoon, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Rachel stood there holding a small bouquet of lilies, my favorite. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair loosely tied back, nothing like the polished woman who used to walk through my halls like a queen. Mrs. Porter, she said softly, thank you for letting me come. I invited her in. She sat at the edge of the sofa, hands clasped together, trembling. Then, without hesitation, she looked up at me and spoke. I disrespected you. I hurt you. I made your son choose between us when no mother should ever face that. I can't undo what I did, but I want to make it right. I'm sorry from the bottom of my heart. Her voice broke on the last words, and for the first time I believed her. I reached across the table and took her hand. Rachel, forgiveness isn't given because someone asks, it's given because they've learned. If you truly mean this, show it through your actions. She nodded, tears falling freely. I will. That evening, Michael came home with her. He looked thinner, older, but when he saw me, his eyes filled with relief. Mom, he whispered, and before I could say anything, he hugged me tight. I'm sorry, he said, his voice shaking. I forgot who taught me what love really means. I held him close. Then remember now, and don't forget again. We sat together that night, the three of us, and made new rules for this home, rules built on respect, not pride. No shouting, no silent treatments, no changes without asking. For the first time in months, laughter returned to the kitchen. Later, as I watched them clean the dishes side by side, I whispered to myself, sometimes you have to lose everything to gain what matters most. I didn't just get my home back that day, I got my peace back and the respect I should never have had to fight for. Months passed, and slowly the wounds began to heal. Life inside the house returned to something I thought I had lost forever: quiet, steady, and full of small, genuine kindnesses. Rachel kept her word. She asked before changing anything, helped me with the cooking, and never raised her voice again. Sometimes, while we folded laundry together, she would tell me stories about her childhood, the loneliness, the chaos after her parents' divorce, the fear of never belonging anywhere. I finally understood her. She wasn't cruel by nature. She was just a woman who didn't know what real family looked like, until she came here. Michael also changed. He no longer took sides. When disagreements happened, he listened instead of shouting. Sometimes I'd find him sitting with Rachel in the garden, helping her water the same flowers she once uprooted. There was peace now, not perfection, but something better: mutual respect. One afternoon, Rachel approached me as I was trimming the roses. She looked thoughtful. Elaine, she said softly, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you do it? How did you stay so strong when we hurt you like that? I smiled faintly. When you've lived through losing a husband, raising 2 boys alone, and building a home from dust, you learn that strength isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the voice that says, I deserve respect, even when no one else believes it. Rachel nodded slowly. You taught me that. I thought strength meant control, but now I know it means patience. That evening, I sat on the porch with my coffee, the sun setting behind the trees Harvey once planted. I could almost hear his voice whisper, You did it, Elaine. I smiled. He was right. This home wasn't just bricks and wood, it was the story of my life. Proof that dignity and love can survive even the harshest storms. To anyone listening to my story today, remember this: respect is not something you beg for, it's something you uphold. And sometimes the bravest act of love is standing firm when the world expects you to bow. If my story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and tell me where you're watching from. Because no matter where you are, everyone deserves a home built not just with love but with dignity. A year later, my house looked almost exactly the same as it did before. Same yellow walls, same white porch rails, but the feeling inside was different. Softer, warmer. The air no longer carried tension, it carried laughter. Every Saturday, Michael and Rachel joined me for breakfast. Rachel would bring pastries from the bakery down the street, and Michael would make coffee just the way I liked it, strong, black, and honest. We'd sit around the kitchen table, telling stories about Harvey, about their early marriage, about all the small things that once caused so much pain but now felt so distant. Sometimes I'd catch Rachel watching me quietly. One morning, she finally said, "You know, Elaine, when we first moved in, I thought you wanted control, but now I realize all you wanted was peace." I smiled. Peace is what every mother wants for her home, but it has to be earned by everyone who lives in it. She nodded, and there was no defensiveness in her eyes this time, only understanding. That afternoon, I went out to the garden to water my plants. The same roses that had once been tossed aside now bloomed brighter than ever. As I knelt to pull out a few weeds, I heard footsteps behind me. Rachel was there, holding a small clay pot. Inside it was a single white lily. "I thought this would look nice here," she said gently. "But only if you agree." I looked up at her and smiled. "Let's plant it together." As we pressed the soil around the lily, I realized something I hadn't before. Forgiveness isn't a single moment, it's a choice you keep making one day at a time. When the last petal brushed my hand, I whispered, "Welcome home." Because now, after everything, after the shouting, the silence, and the tears, the house finally felt like a home again. And maybe that was Harvey's dream all along, not just a roof over our heads, but a place where love could be rebuilt, brick by brick, once more. If you've stayed with me until this point, thank you. This story wasn't just about a house, or about conflict between a mother-in-law and her son's wife. It was about boundaries, dignity, and the courage it takes to protect your peace, even when it means standing alone. Elaine's journey reminds us that love without respect becomes dependence, and kindness without limits turns into weakness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your children, for your family, and for yourself is to say enough. When you set boundaries, people might call you cold, proud, or unforgiving. But in truth, you're teaching others how to treat you. Elaine didn't rebuild her home through anger or revenge, she did it through self-respect, patience, and the quiet strength of a woman who refused to be erased in her own story. Months later, when her son Michael came to visit with Rachel, laughter filled those walls again, not because she surrendered, but because she stood firm. And from that firmness grew understanding. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, remember, you have the right to peace. You have the right to be respected, and it's never too late to take your power back, kindly but firmly. Now, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Elaine's place? Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe for more real-life stories about strength, boundaries, and redemption. Because here on The Art of Revenge, every story reminds us, sometimes the sweetest